What's up, sons? It's Blind Run with Son of a Tech, and I have another video card review for you. Today is the MSI GTX 1080 Gaming X Edition, and this is my new seat. These are my new chairs. I love them. We might talk about them at some other point. The Geforce GTX 1080 Gaming X Edition features the new twin Frozer cooler from MSI. While the shroud and fans are a visual improvement over previous generations, it lacks the polish of some of its competitors. Underneath the shroud is a beefy heatsink with copper pipes begging to be polished. To support the larger PCB and heatsink, MSI has equipped the card with a sturdy backplate, graced with a white MSI logo and a barely visible black-on-black dragon. Display adapters include 3 display ports, a single HDMI 2.0 port, and a single dual-link DVI, which is standard for any of the 10 series NVIDIA GPUs. Next we have a 6-pin and a 8-pin power adapter, sporting an 8+2 power phase for a total of 10, which is a massive upgrade from the 4+1 power phase on the Founders Edition card. However, it is odd that even with the additional power adapters, we only have 180 watts, which is what the Founders Edition aka reference cards are limited at. Under the hood, the card sports an 1847 MHz boost clock out of the box, which is a whopping 100 MHz over the Founders Edition. This seems to be about standard across all aftermarket cards right now. The boost clock communicates over a 256 bus at 320 GB a second with 8 GB of GDDR5X, which is supposedly an improvement over the standard GDDR5 that's found on the 1070. And this is overclocked on this card to a 10,000 MHz effective clock. This particular card didn't seem to gain any additional core clock improvements over the Founders Edition, gaining a measly 75 MHz over shipped boost clock. The memory, however, did overclock surprisingly well, hitting an additional 400 MHz. This translated into almost no FPS gain over an overclocked Founders Edition, begging the question if custom PCBs and power phases are even worth it anymore. The non-reference cooler is the real MVP of the third-party cards, and while I don't like the design subjectively, the twin Frozer 6 performs admirably. While at idle, the fans remain off, which is wonderful for media consumption, and once the games start demanding 100%, temperatures never crack 65 degrees Celsius in my tests. Here are the tests with an EVGA 1070 for reference. Hopping straight into 3D Mark Time Spy Graphics Test 2, we see frame rates of 61.97 in 1080p. On Graphics Test 1, this is slightly better, with a frame rate of 74.12 frames per second at 1080p. Hopping into Grand Theft Auto 5, a DirectX 11 game on very high settings, we have a frame rate of 78.5. In 3D Mark Firestrike 1.1 at 1080p, we have a frame rate of 91.65. Hopping into Far Cry Primal with HD textures on, at max settings, we have a frame rate of 112. Hopping into The Witcher 3, which is another DirectX 11 game, and set to Ultra with no hairworks, we're capping out at 132 frames per second, which is a huge boost over the 1070 surprisingly, and maybe has something to do with the GDDR5X. I'm not quite sure. Next we have 3D Mark Firestrike Graphics Test 1, which comes out to 112.2 frames per second. And one of our favorites and another DirectX 12 game is going to be Gears of War Ultimate Edition with 4K textures at 106 frames per second. Finally, we have Doom running in Vulkan on Ultra settings. And we're just about to start popping past that 200 frames per second Pascal Titan X. Let's do it in 1080p at 191.2 frames per second. In conclusion, if you're attracted to the urban styling of the original Fast and the Furious, and your build is okay with red, the MSI Twin Frozer 6 cooling solution performs admirably. The RGB feature seems useless since they tagged it in blood. However, the stock boost clock is more than enough to keep you happy without touching any overclocking utility. If you are technically savvy though, there is no performance advantage hiding under the Torx 2.0 fans. what the fuck is the extra 6-pin doing? Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what GTX 1080 you're looking at purchasing and which ones you would like to see a review on. Until next time, I'll see you next Tuesday.